First off, 124,416 meals you all packed yesterday. $124,416 meals to go to starving children around the world. Southeast, Friday evening, and all day Saturday. Paid for, packaged, and shipped. I say shipped. I didn't look to see if is the truck still here? They usually move it Monday. But it's on the truck, ready to go. Last year, I think we did 108,000, if I remember right. This year, we did 124,000. That's a lot of food for a lot of starving children.
You have a little faith there, laddie.
Who, you?
Yeah.
I never doubted.
Sermon, we weren't going to show up.
I never doubted. All right. I wanted to introduce you to a new ministry that we're rolling out and invite any of you who would want to, and I hope many of you will, to participate. We're calling it Because I Care, BIC. Let your little light shine, even if it's a BIC lighter. Got it? And basically, the thought behind it is we are, according to our roles, if you look at our church roll here at Southeast, we are about 1,000 members. That includes children and grandchildren, but not any dogs or cats. We have 12 elders. That's a lot of people to keep up with, isn't it? So what we'd like to do for several reasons, and one is to just be better connected. We're starting this Because I Care ministry, which will be an opportunity for anyone, our working people and retired people alike, to participate, because it's going to be very low impact, very low time consumption, but I think serve a very important purpose. We want to connect with our members, and we want you to help us. So what we're doing, we're setting up a program that will allow or invite you to select one person, member Southeast, not a family member, one person, and you take responsibility for staying in touch with that person. Very simple. A weekly contact of some kind. It can be a phone call. If you see them Sunday morning and talk to them, that's a connection. It can be an email, it can be a text, it can be whatever you want it to be. But we want you to know every week that they're okay. What's going on in their life. And then we want you to be accountable for that. So we have set up a page on the internet. You don't have to log in. You don't have to create an account. You don't have to have a password. Every week I'm going to send you a link, and you click on the link, and it'll take you to this form. It's a Google form. You put your name and the name of the person you're taking care of, checking on. And there's about 4 or 5 options. You check one of them. If they have a prayer request, you put it on there, and that gets sent to the proper people. If they have a special need, you put it on there, and that gets sent to the proper ministry. You click submit, and you're done. And just to kind of run through it a little bit more in detail, and I'm not going to belabor this too much because we got to get into the wonderful subject of marriage, divorce, and remarriage, and I know you're sitting on the edge of your seat waiting for that. We will have it set up so that there won't be duplication. So it's kind of a first come, first serve. And some of you, by the way, I hope you realize, some of us, will be the recipient of this, whether we're volunteering to be the active volunteer or not. And I hope you don't object to that, because we're family. And we need to take care of each other like family. So volunteers will select one person or one family to contact once a week. They'll remain with this fellowship until there's a reason to change. So this is not a weekly thing, a monthly thing, annual thing. This is you and that person. Part of this is to develop a relationship. Ministry leader or designee, and that will be me or Janelle Hopper. We will maintain this online forum, and we'll monitor it so that we'll see your comments, and anything that needs action, we'll make that happen. I'll send out a link to your email each week as a reminder, and also to make it easy for you, all you got to do is click on the link. You can use your phone, you can use your tablet, you can use your computer, anything you can get to the internet with. It's a very simple form. Take you about 15 seconds, unless you've got a lot to write. And then you're done. And you can bookmark it, or if you want to, or just click on the link I'll send you every week. I'm gonna make it as simple as I can. And you'll select one of these. I saw them in person. That's a connection. That's good. That's all you need. Spoke with them by phone, left a voice message, texted, emailed, and received a response. If you send an email and you don't get a response, you haven't really had a connection, right? You don't know. You don't know if they got it or not. If something goes on and you can't make connection with them, well, hopefully you'll want to follow up on that, because that could be a red flag. Or, I was busy and I couldn't get to it this week. Okay, life happens. That's fine. There's a place for that. That's all you'll see on the form, and then a submit button, except for there'll be a little place there. If they have a prayer request, then you'll put that prayer request in. If it doesn't, just ignore that. If they have a special need, you'll put that in and submit that. So what I would like to do today is, and you can think about it, this is an ongoing program, so it doesn't matter, but I've got a little sheet of paper up here after class. If you're interested, if you'll just put your name there, or you can text me or email me. Don't tell me, because you know what happens if you tell me, right? I won't even get out of the building with that in my mind. So text me, email me, or leave your name here, and I'll send you this program so you can look over it. And I'll also send you a list of suggested names of the congregation that you can choose from, or you can choose your own. They don't have to be off my list. The only thing is, if somebody's already got the name, well, then you'll need to choose another person, and I'll let you know that. Okay? That's pretty quick, but gives you the highlight, and I'm happy to answer questions anytime after class. And wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if every member of the church had somebody in the congregation who was looking out for them every week? That would be the ultimate goal. I'm sure we'll never reach that, but that's the ultimate goal, and we'd like you to help. All right, here we go. Just by way of review, so that we keep this in context, because it's so important that we keep this in context. I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, I'm going to give you 6 examples of what it means for your righteousness to exceed the righteousness of the Pharisees. Got it? And I'm going to use hyperbole, and I'm going to raise all of these to the level of the excellent. Here they are. You've heard it said, don't murder. I tell you, don't hate. I tell you, you say don't commit adultery. I say don't lust. I say don't break your oath. You say don't break your oath. I say don't make an oath. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. You say an eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth. I say turn the other cheek. You say love your neighbor, hate your enemy. I say love everyone. I know I did. on purpose. We don't have any trouble with those 5, understanding them as rising to the level of perfection. If you want to be perfect in my kingdom, this is what you need to do. Do any of us reach that level? No, not one. And we never will. Do we strive for it? Yes, we do. That's the ideal. And Jesus always sets the ideal. Out of all of these 6, there's only one that we make an exception for. And that's number 3. You say, give divorced wife a certificate. What do I say? Don't divorce. That is the ideal. Would you agree with that? All right. Here's the text. It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you, Shmika Rabbi, I tell you, that anyone who divorces his wife except for marital unfaithfulness, or some translations say adultery. The Greek word here is porneia, where we get our word pornography, causes her to become an adulteress, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. The Bible said it, I believe it, that settles it. Next subject. Well, that would be good, except what does the Bible say? And what is it that we believe? And what's settled about it? Very few passages in Scripture that have caused more anguish and division and heartbreak and maybe even mental illness than this passage. We don't have any trouble with the other 5. Jesus is using hyperbole, and he's just calling us to the ideal. But not this one. This one's different. Or so we've said, right? I'm going to give a little bit of background just for texture on the state of divorce in the world. And just maybe to help put things in kind of a perspective. I say there that only 2 countries in the world don't allow divorce. Philippines and Vatican City. Of course, Vatican City is just that little part of Rome where the Catholic diocese is. And even in the Philippines, if you happen to be a Muslim, then you're allowed to divorce. So basically, there are none. In the U.S., the divorce rate, if you look on the internet, it'll say it's 50%, with 70% of divorces filed by women. Statistics can be used in many different ways. We've got Don here today. He's a marriage counselor, and he might take issue with the number, and it's okay. It doesn't matter. The number's high. However you want to figure it out, the number's high. And there's basically, as I think, and you can, Don, you can correct me on any of this if you want to, but basically the percentages for those who are practicing Christians in the United States and those who are not is essentially the same. There's some religious groups where that's not true. Mormons, for one. But in general, would you agree with that, Don? That's fairly...
It depends on how you define practicing.
Okay, how you define practicing. I'm talking about just, would call you, if you ask them, are you a Christian, they'd say yes.
Yeah. So for active church members, it's about 27%.
Don says that for active church members, it's about 27%. So that's only 27% too high. If you think that marriage and that divorce and remarriage is the answer, according to my statistics that I have, 67% of second marriages end in divorce. So the chances go down on the second one that you'll be successful. In the U.S. today, there are nearly 14 million single parents raising over 21 million children. 73% of single parents are mothers. You might have thought it was higher than that, but I've been surprised in our Family Promise program. It's not at all unusual for us to have a single parent who is a father in our program. I've known of several. Among this percentage of single mothers, 45% of single mothers are currently divorced or separated. 1.7% are widowed, and 34% of single mothers have never been married. That doesn't add up to 100, so there's some other variations in there. I have the utmost respect for single mothers raising children. I do. I have it in my family. You have it in your family. Is it the ideal? Never. Never. What's Jesus doing? Jesus is raising the subject to the ideal. In Genesis 1:27 it says, male and female, he created them, and it was very good. This is the ideal. I don't think anybody has any question about this, but we're going to review it anyway. The first wedding that took place, recorded in Genesis 1:28, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. And then later on, he said, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. That was the easiest command that Adam and Eve ever received. They didn't have a mother and father. So it was easy for them to leave and cleave. Sometimes it's harder in our world, isn't it? Mothers have a little trouble. Wives have a little trouble separating from mother. But this is the ideal. Matthew 19:4, from the beginning, this is Jesus raising the same statement. From the beginning, God made them male and female, not male and And he said, this explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. Let no one separate them, for God has joined them together. He said, let no one. He didn't say no one could. He just said, don't let it happen. Not that it can't happen. Malachi 2:15, didn't the Lord make you one with your wife? In body and spirit, you're his. And what does he want? Godly children from your union. So guard yourselves, remain loyal to the wife of your youth. For I hate divorce, says the Lord, the God of Israel. It is as cruel as putting on a victim's blood-stained coat. Isn't that a vivid metaphor? Yike. Always remain loyal to your wife. No one has any question or any doubt about what the ideal is. So just looking at the overall picture of things, comparing the time of Jesus and the time of the Mosaic Law. At that time, marriages were basically arranged by parents. Seemed to have worked out pretty well for them. It still is in some cultures. I don't think we could get that to fly in the United States today, even though some parents do try pretty hard. Usually not very well, very successfully. Betrothal, or what we call engagement, was legally binding. It was equal to marriage, but just the marriage had not been consummated. We saw this, of course, with Joseph and Mary. They were betrothed. They were engaged, and it takes a divorcement to break a betrothal under the customs of Jesus' day. There was no distinction between a civil and religious ceremony because there was a theocracy. Everything was governed by the religious leaders. There was no license that I know of that you had to have to become married under the law of Moses or in first century Israel. It did take a letter of divorcement. There had to be a letter, and that was, I believe, primarily to protect the woman, to give her some possibility of life after divorce. Everything was heavily weighted in favor of the male, and marriage was understood to be a covenant sanctioned by God. Today in our country, courtship is the norm, little or no family involvement. Families may want to be involved, may try to be involved, and may successfully do so in some cases, but many, they don't have a lot of control. Engagement period has no legal standing. That's strictly between the man and the woman. They can enter into it or out of it at their will. It requires a civil license to be considered a legally binding arrangement. Now, there's some exceptions to that with common law marriage that we could get into, but that's not very relevant. It can be either a civil or a religious ceremony, and my understanding is, if these statistics are anywhere near true, is that only about 19% of the marriages now are actually considered, would be something where you would stand in front of a preacher or a priest or a religious person and perform the ceremony. Many of them are in a civil court, a justice of the peace or a friend or whatever. In most states now, and Texas included, pretty much anybody can perform a ceremony. Divorce is controlled by the state, I think primarily because of the physical things that are involved in a marriage, the property and the various holdings that are in common. Those have to be sorted out by the state. And marriage is considered to be a legal contract under most state laws, or all state laws, I guess. A little bit different. So going back to the law of Moses a little bit, and in the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, it begins, the very first one, with, "You shall have no other gods beside me." God frequently uses the metaphor of divorce and marriage with Israel. Several times he talks about divorcing Israel. Of course, there's the command for no adultery, and there's a command for not coveting your neighbor's wife. And the rabbis and the religious leaders have had a field day trying to explain when coveting becomes sin. How do you define that? How do you build a wall around that? That's a tough challenge, but I mean, they've written volumes about that. There's some relationship here to the law of concerning slaves under the Hebrew system. It follows in the next chapter after the Decalogue. Understand that there are two different kinds of slaves in Israel under the Hebrew law. There's the slave that is taken by force, captive through battle. And then there's a slave who is an Israelite who indentures himself for whatever reason, usually debt or something like that, to be a slave. The law says that for those who are Israelites, not the ones who are captured, but the Israelites, in the sabbatical year, every 7 years, all Israelite slaves must be set free. Of course, 7 sabbatical years becomes the year of Jubilee, and then at that time, everybody's set free and all the land goes back to the original owner. If an Israelite who indentures himself or becomes a slave is married before he goes into slavery, his wife comes with him. And when he comes out of slavery, the wife comes with him. If a man is indentured as a slave and he marries in that state of slavery while he's a slave. When he gets ready to come out, his wife and his children do not come with him. Now, he can choose to remain in slavery, to remain with his wife and children. He goes to the door of the house, and they've taken, they pierce his ear. And he makes the pledge that I want to be your slave for the rest of my life. So that's the law concerning marriage and divorce for a enslaved person under the law of Moses. Another kind of weird thing in the law of Moses, and this is in Deuteronomy 22, a man marries a woman, and they're just married, and he decides that his wife, whom he thought was a virgin, is not. And so he makes a claim against her as her being not a virgin. If his claim is false, if the family or whoever can prove that she is indeed a virgin when she marries him, then as a punishment, the husband is beaten. He's fined 100 silver shekels, and he can never divorce that woman for any cause. If it turns out that his claim that his wife is not a virgin when he marries her can be proven true, then they just stone the wife to death. Of course, you know, under the law of Moses, the penalty for adultery supposedly was if both parties are guilty, then both parties are stoned. I mean, if it's adultery, both parties have to be guilty. You can't be guilty of adultery by yourself. Another one, a man rapes an engaged virgin. This is a virgin who's betrothed to somebody. If he does it in town, then both he and the woman are guilty of capital punishment and are stoned. If he does it in the country and it's discovered, then only the man is stoned. The rationale, of course, is that if you're in town, the woman can cry out and someone will hear her, and it will be proven that she is being raped against her will. I mean, rape is always against the will, but she's being raped, and therefore she's not stoned, only the man. If, on the other hand, a man rapes an unengaged virgin, this is somebody who's not yet betrothed to anyone, then he must pay her father 50 pieces of silver, marry the girl, and he can never divorce her. It's not adultery because they're not married. This is the law of Moses. This is what Jesus is dealing with when these people come to him and challenge him with these questions about divorce. Deuteronomy 24, if a married man finds something disgraceful, here the word is irva, I can't say it right. That Hebrew word is roughly equivalent to the Greek word porneia that we'll see in the New Testament. And it's got a pretty wide range of interpretation. It's oftentimes used if they're trying to describe somebody who is nude. There's nudity. Something that's disgraceful, there's a blemish, there's a shame, there's an uncleanliness. If he is married to someone and he finds something disgraceful about her, he can write her a letter of divorcement and send her away. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we talk about Jesus' day and some of the doctrines that he encountered. If she remarries and then divorces again, according to Deuteronomy 24, she may never return to her first husband. Remember that. That's important. Deuteronomy 24 says, that would be detestable to the Lord and bring guilt upon the land. You got it in your head? Ezra 9, the Jews were ordered to divorce their foreign wives. You remember they came back from Babylonian captivity, and some of the Jews that had stayed behind, that weren't carried off, had married the women of the land. And even some of them that came back had married some of the women of the land. And Ezra commanded them to divorce their wives, even though there were children involved, divorce them and remain in Jerusalem without them. Okay, let's talk about polygamy a little bit. Yay! First time we encounter polygamy is in Genesis chapter 4, I believe. Lamech was sixth generation from Cain. He was a son of Methuselah. You've heard of Methuselah. And Scripture just simply says that he had 2 wives, and then it gives the names of the 2 wives. That's the first instance we have. Abraham had at least 3 wives, plus concubines. Jacob had at least 4 wives. Moses had 2. Esau, Gideon, Saul, David, Solomon, many others. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 porcupines. Josephus and Justin Martyr both write about the polygamy, acknowledge it. There's a passage in Timothy where Paul is given the checklist of what to look for when you want to appoint men to be shepherds, to be overseers of a congregation. And he says that an elder must be the husband of but one wife. Now, we've written and interpreted that many, many ways. But in my mind, I'm satisfied that Paul is saying, you've got polygamists among you, but we don't want them to be your overseer because we're looking for the ideal. The what we call qualifications for an elder from Timothy, he's setting, like Jesus, he's setting the bar here at the ideal. You won't find that man. And you certainly wouldn't find him among the converted pagans that made up the churches in Paul's congregations. Polygamy was a fact of life. And Paul says, I don't want your overseers, I don't want your shepherds, your examples, your leaders to be polygamous. Even in the time of the Reformation, one of the well-known Anabaptists, a man by the name of Rothman, he got the idea that in order to restore Christianity, we ought to go back and pull in the principles of the Hebrew law. And under the Hebrew law, he considered polygamy to be acceptable, and so that was his justification for having 9 wives. Islam permits 4 wives, just in case you men wanted to know. I've had the opportunity to be involved in several different cultures around the world, and when I was teaching in Athens, almost all of my students were from Africa. They were in Athens trying to eke out a living to keep their families alive back in Africa. They were from Nigeria, Cameroon, and a few other countries in Africa. And I asked my students, and I had quite a few in that class. I think there were probably 20, 25 students in that class. How many of them came from a polygamous household? And I think all but 1 or 2 did. When we go as missionaries into these countries where polygamy is acceptable and legal, and we convert somebody to our Church of Christ Christianity, and we say, you got to get rid of all of your wives except one. Which one do you think you're going to choose?
Aren't they pulling resources, though, to live in some cases?
I'm sorry?
Aren't they pulling resources?
Are they pulling resources to live? I think that, I don't know all the justifications, but I wouldn't doubt it, because in some of these third world countries, you need all of the labor pool you can have just to eke out a living.
I wonder if when they're picking one, if the others can volunteer to opt out.
Others can volunteer to leave. That's a good question. But it's a really serious problem, because all of these wives have children. Are you beginning to get the picture that marriage and divorce and remarriage is not a simple cut and dried thing? Our text said, it has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. I tell you, anyone who divorces his wife, except for marital unfaithfulness, porneia, causes her to become an adulteress, and anyone who marries the divorced woman commits adultery.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that last one has always gotten me, because if somebody is divorced and put out, it automatically makes the person who marries them an adulterer. I mean, that just seems
We're going to
really
get to
strange.
it. You're jumping ahead. We're getting there. I'll get to you in a little bit, Jeff. Why then, they said, did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away? Jesus replied, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. But it was not this way from the beginning. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for porneia, and marries another woman, commits adultery. Some Pharisees came and tested him, saying, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? What did Moses command you, he said. They said, Moses permitted a man to write a certificate of divorce and send her away. It was because of your hearts were hard that Moses wrote the law. Jesus replied, but at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be reunited to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Mark 12 says, when they were in the house again, the disciples asked Jesus about this. He answered, anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another man, she commits adultery. What's different about that verse than the others? No escape. No porneia. Mark does not allow an escape clause. Luke, anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery, and the man who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. What's different? No porneia. No escape clause. Who's right, Matthew or Luke? Matthew or Mark and Luke? It's 2-1 in favor of Mark and Luke, if you're counting. I don't know why the difference. I don't know why Matthew puts in the what we call escape clause. Of course, we have written it as adultery, and that's just not right. He didn't say adultery. Adultery in our culture means a married man and woman, one or the other, has an extramarital affair. That's our definition of adultery. That's not what Jesus said. I don't know what he said in Aramaic, but it got translated into Greek as porneia, and porneia is different. There's a word for divorce. Well, they didn't have the word divorce. They had put away or set aside. I don't know if Matthew had a reason that Mark and Luke didn't have to add that, or, I mean, I hate to walk down the trail of scribal gloss because we can try to make excuses for anything we don't like with scribal glosses. But it's inconsistent, to say the least. Paul, on the other hand, and here's where it really gets murky. And no, it's already murky. It gets more murky. To the married I give this command, not I but the Lord. A wife must not separate from her husband. All right, got that. But if she does, wait a minute, Paul. Mark and Luke said don't. But if she does, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband, and a husband must not divorce his wife. To the rest I say this, I, not the Lord, if any brother has a wife who is not a believer, and she is willing to live with him, he must not divorce her. And if a woman has a husband who is not a believer and he is willing to live with her, she must not divorce him. And in the next slide, he's going to say, but if she does, or if he does, let him go. That's not the escape clause that Matthew gave. Mark and Luke gave no escape clause. Paul has given you another one. If you're married to an unbeliever and they choose not to live with you, divorce them. But what I wanted to point out also, what's the remedy? Be reconciled to your husband. What did the law of Moses say about if you divorce your husband and then you later marry someone else and go back to that husband? What did the law of Moses say? It's an abomination to God. This has been something that has caused so much pain and hurt within, I know our churches of Christ, not here, but many churches that I've been associated with, is that preachers, in an attempt to reconcile all of this, says there's one remedy for this. If you've been married twice or 3 times or 4 times, the only solution, the only way you can be a member of this church, the only way you can get to heaven is to go back to your first wife. Have you heard that? I've heard it many times. The law of Moses said, don't do it. It's an abomination. We're running out of time. We've got members here at Southeast, some of them are sitting in this class, who've gone to other congregations when they came here and started looking for a place to worship, who've gone to other congregations of churches of Christ, more than one couple also. And on either the first or their second visit, they were point blank asked, have you ever been divorced? And if the answer is yes, then they will tell you, you might want to find somewhere else to worship. True, Don? True story. And that's what we're dealing with this. The Bible said it, I believe it, that settles it. Well, what did the Bible say? And what is it you believe? And how is it settled? We're not going to get through this today. Our time is almost up. Jeff, I'll get to you next week. I'm sorry, brother. We just ran out of time for you.
I'm just going to say this. Next week about the children, but this next Sunday.
All right. Remind me, and we'll let you have your say about the children. That'll be great. We're not through yet with this. I think it's a very important subject. We have to wrestle with it. And we'll come to a conclusion. We'll come to a summary, Lord willing, on Easter morning, resurrection morning. Won't that be fun? Remind you, if you want to be a part of our big ministry, Because I Care ministry, notify me, sign up here, or send me a text or an email. I'd love to have you. The church would love to have you. And thank you for your bearing with me on this. I know it's tedious and it's not very pleasant, but I assure you I'm going to come to a summary from me, and I'll give you an opportunity to rebut and to expand and to explain. And thank you for your presence, and thank you to all of you who are online, and have a wonderful God bless